Right now, preparations are absolutely in full swing for the massive 2026 World Cup across North America. We're talking billions of dollars, state-of-the-art stadiums, dedicated cybersecurity task forces, and literally rings of steel protecting the players and, well, the tournament's ultimate prize. But it wasn't always this way. Okay, let's dive into this because today's explainer covers an unbelievable true crime mystery from 1966. It's the year the most coveted prize in sports just vanished into thin air, plunging an entire host nation into total sheer panic. It's a story packed with bumbling thieves, high-speed chases, and how the hero of the entire hour turned out to be a dog named Pickles.
I mean, the contrast here is genuinely mind-blowing. If you look at today's high-tech tournament security and compare it to March 1966, it is honestly almost comical. So England was getting ready to host the World Cup that July. The Football Association agreed to put the original silver-gilt Jules Rimet trophy on display at a stamp exhibition called Stampex in Westminster Central Hall. And the security? Get this. 2 uniformed officers, 2 plainclothes officers, a simple padlock on the back of the display case, and a wooden bar holding the rear doors of the building closed. Yeah, not exactly Fort Knox. In fact, thieves just walked right in, unscrewed the bolts from that wooden bar, popped the padlock, grabbed the trophy, and practically just walked right out.
And the window for this absolute disaster was incredibly tight. The trophy went on display on March 19th. The very next day, a Sunday, the guards went on their noon circuit. At exactly 12:10 p.m., they noticed the display case was forced open. The trophy was just gone. Scotland Yard's elite flying squad was immediately called in, but, well, the damage was already done. The press caught wind of it, and the story absolutely exploded globally the very next day. Just imagine the sheer humiliation for England, the nation that literally birthed modern football, now facing the very real prospect of hosting a World Cup in just a few months with no cup to actually present to the winner.
To really wrap your head around exactly how high the stakes were here, you just have to look at the money. The actual material worth of the Jules Rimet trophy at the time was only about £3,000, but for this specific exhibition, they'd insured it for £30,000. So this wasn't just some hunk of metal, it was an international symbol holding massive financial and cultural weight. The theft became a global sensation literally overnight, completely knocking the UK general election right off the front pages of all the newspapers.
Then, the very next day, the plot thickens dramatically. Joe Mears, who was the chairman of the Football Association, gets an anonymous phone call. This is followed by a parcel delivered straight to his home. And inside that parcel? The removable lining from the top of the trophy. Absolute, undeniable proof that they had the real thing. Along with it was a ransom note containing a pretty chilling threat. To me, it is only so much scrap gold. Assume it's one for the pot. A mysterious caller who just went by the name Jackson demanded £15,000, specifically in 5 and 10-pound notes. The deal was, if the FA went to the police, the trophy would be melted down into scrap.
Now, what's really fascinating about this whole sting is how the police responded. Because despite those threats, Mears went straight to Scotland Yard, and they set up this thrilling flying squad sting operation. Detective Inspector Charles Buggy goes undercover pretending to be Mears' assistant, McPhee. Buggy packs a suitcase filled mostly with just ordinary scrap paper, but he disguises it with a few real banknotes on the top and bottom. He meets Jackson at Battersea Park. When Jackson gets into Buggy's car to check the money, he completely falls for it, doesn't realize it's fake. But as they're driving to go get the trophy, Jackson spots a police van trailing them. He completely panics, jumps out of the moving vehicle, and just takes off. Buggy chases him down, first in the car, then literally on foot through a house garden, finally tackling him to the ground and making the arrest.
But back at the station, that dramatic arrest suddenly just fizzled out. Jackson was quickly identified as Edward Betchley, a 46-year-old petty thief and used car dealer, and he adamantly denied stealing the cup himself. He claimed he was merely a middleman, paid £500 by some shadowy figure he only knew as the Pole. Betchley completely refused to give up the mastermind, which left the police at an absolute dead end. Sure, they had a middleman, but no Mr. Big, and far more importantly, they still had no World Cup. With the summer tournament rapidly approaching, Scotland Yard was, frankly, completely stumped.
And honestly, this next part just brilliantly illustrates the sheer absurdity of history. Because while Scotland Yard's finest detectives were hitting a total brick wall, the case was actually cracked by a 2-year-old mongrel dog. Yep, you heard that right. Exactly 1 week after the theft, on March 27th, a Thames letterman named David Corbett left his flat in Beulah Hill, southeast London, just to use a telephone box across the street. He brought his dog, Pickles, along for the quick walk. Suddenly, Pickles starts sniffing intently at this strange parcel wrapped up in old newspaper and tied with string, just shoved right under a garden hedge.
So, Corbett bends down, peels back the paper, and sees these engraved names: Germany, Uruguay, Brazil. and it hits him. He is holding the missing World Cup. He immediately rushes it to the local police station. And incredibly, Corbett actually thought it might be an IRA bomb at first, and the police actually treated him as their prime suspect, at least until his alibi cleared him anyway. But the aftermath for these two was completely life-changing. Corbett ended up receiving rewards totaling £6,000. To put that into perspective, the actual England players only received £1,000 each for winning the entire tournament. And Pickles? He became an absolute global superstar. He won medals, got a year's supply of free dog food, and even starred alongside Lawrence Harvey in the 1966 spy comedy film The Spy with the Cold Nose.
But wait, because the drama definitely doesn't end there. Did the 1966 winners actually lift a fake trophy? Well, as it turns out, the Football Association was so profoundly terrified of the cup being stolen again during the actual tournament that they took a massive, highly secret precaution. They quietly hired a silversmith named George Bird to forge an absolutely perfect replica.
So, the crucial point is how this secret replica actually played out in real life. When England famously won the final on July 30th, the Queen presented the original trophy to Captain Bobby Moore. But right after the match, down underneath Wembley Stadium, a policeman secretly swapped the real trophy for the bronze replica. Almost none of the players even knew it happened. England actually used that replica for public appearances for years. And decades later, scientists from the University of Manchester used state-of-the-art X-ray CT scans and chemical analysis to prove this once and for all. They proved that the original was cast silver and gold-plated, while the version now safely sitting in the National Football Museum is made of bronze and gold-plated. So it is, without a doubt, that secret 1966 replica.
Tragically, though, this whole story builds to a pretty dark epilogue. Fast forward to 1970, and Brazil wins the World Cup for a third time. Now, according to FIFA rules back then, that meant they actually got to keep the original Jules Rimet trophy permanently. So they put it on display at the Brazilian Football Confederation offices over in Rio de Janeiro. But lightning struck twice. On December 19, 1983, a group of thieves, masterminded by a banker and football agent named Sergio Peralta, overpowered the night watchman, pried open the bulletproof glass, and stole the original trophy all over again.
Only this time, unlike in 1966, there was no Pickles the dog to save the day. The police did make arrests. Peralta, an ex-police officer known as Chico Barbudo, and an Argentine gold dealer named Juan Carlos Hernandez were all swept up in the massive investigation. But the justice system completely faltered. The suspects eventually fled when it came time to actually serve their sentences, or they met violent ends. And the original Jules Rimet trophy, it simply vanished into the criminal underworld.
Which really leaves us with this final haunting question. Where is it today? For years, the widely accepted story was that Juan Carlos Hernandez just melted the trophy down into gold bars. But modern experts strongly doubt this. Remember that CT scan we just talked about? The trophy wasn't solid gold, it was silver gilt. Melting it down wouldn't yield much pure gold at all, and traces found at the foundry didn't even match the trophy's specific chemical makeup. Plus, an intact Jules Rimet trophy is worth infinitely more on the black market than its raw scrap value. So, is the most famous object in sports history sitting in some billionaire collector's secret basement right now? Or is it hidden away in a dusty attic somewhere, just waiting for another dog to sniff it out? What do you think?